Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year. Today is the first live of 2020, and I'm so happy to have today's guest out of Texas. This is a lawyer. Her name is Nkechi Agwuenu, and Nkechi works with homeless people. And today she's going to talk about childhood experiences and how they affect adulthood. So Nkechi, I'm very sure I've not done justice in introducing you. Please introduce yourself, tell us about you and what you do, and welcome to her transformation table.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job. So it is Nkechi Agwuenu, originally, of Nigerian descent. I do work with the homeless population in my professional life, but I host a podcast called What I Wish My Mother Taught Me, where I pretty much just talk about childhood trauma and how it affects us as adults and as parents.
Well, that's amazing, and thank you so much for joining us and being the first guest today. So, my first question is, what made you study the effects of childhood experiences?
So it's really just based on my interest in childhood experiences has just been based on my own individual experience as a parent, and working with the population that I do work with, the homeless. You do see that a lot of issues that people have stems from a lot of trauma that comes out of parenting and childhood. And then when those issues are not dealt with, it then leads into adulthood, and then we transfer those issues to our kids as well. So that's why I decided to study it and figure out how support can be provided to adults and parents to help them be better parents and just help us be better individuals when we deal with the traumas that we face.
Would you say that people are aware of how their childhood experiences affect their adulthood?
I think some people are aware. I think it has to be a conscious thing. You actually have to pay attention to the different behaviors. So, for example, in my case, I can give an example. So, after I was married, I realized that I wasn't taught some basic life skill things to support me in adulthood and then in marriage and then as a parent. So, for example, just cleaning the house, making the bed, how to communicate, how to not fight with a spouse because you are angry, but communicating to get your point across. So I don't know that people are so much aware of how the experiences we have in childhood lead into adulthood. It has to be a conscious decision and a conscious effort made to make sure that you start noticing the patterns in your life that stem from your childhood that are now affecting adulthood and parenthood.
Since you work with homeless population, have you seen this negative effects taking up, space in the adults that you deal with in the homeless population?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use the terminology negative. I would just use experience. So yes, absolutely. You see people who you ask a question and they start yelling, not because they want to yell at you, it's because that's how they learn to communicate. So if you live in a household where parents are yelling, that's how you communicate. That's how you learn to communicate. If you live in a household where you grew up in an environment where people punch walls to release your frustrations, that is your lesson on how to get your frustrations out. So I do see, yes, a lot where people come in and they're behaving in a way that's what they've been taught to behave. It's not the right way, but it's their experiences that then show up in their behaviors, and then not managing or not having the tools to manage those behaviors And those experiences then leads to a lot of bad choices that could cause one to end up on the wrong path in life.
And aside from ending up in the wrong path, I guess communication is key here. You find people have lots of communication issues.
Yes, I mean, as think about it. How many parents actually sit with their children and communicate effectively? So, if a child, if I'll use this example. So, if a mom and dad are fighting and a child witnesses that fight, do you then sit with that child to acknowledge that the way mommy and daddy dealt with this is not the right way? It's better for us to actually talk through our issues. If that's not happening on a regular basis to correct the experience of that child, what they then do is use the example that's been shown to them. So if a mom and dad fight, a child witnesses it, no one addresses it with the child that this is not the way to communicate or to resolve conflict, then in the child's mind, this is how they will resolve conflict in other relationships. So in school, in work, in just in life.
And how does somebody start the journey to study themselves and to create this awareness if they are being affected by this?
So I think it's first acknowledging that there are things in all of our lives that need improvement, right? So, what are those things? What are the things that you can think back to in childhood that you wish were different for you as a child? And are those things showing up in your life as an adult and or as a parent? And then you begin to work or find the information and the knowledge that will help you and the tools that will help you to address those issues. So for example, my issue really is as simple as I don't like to show affection. I'm not an affectionate person. And after I had children, I realized I have to show affection because not receiving affection as a child forced me to not want to give or know how to give affection. So what I did was I set a timer on my phone for a while to schedule times where I would tell my kids I love you. I would hug my kids. And I did that for about 12 months where it's scheduled on my phone. I have an alarm that goes off. And now I don't need that alarm anymore because it's not become a part of me. But I had to recognize that that was an issue I had. And I did not want to transfer that to my children.
Would you say then it took practice? You
Yeah, it
said
took
you
12
started,
months of me scheduling it on the calendar as a
yeah.
reminder and then actually holding myself to account to make sure that when the alarm does go off, no matter what I'm doing, the priority is to change my behavior in a way that positively impacts my children.
So it's a skill that you can acquire. You can be able to change your mindset towards
If you want
how,
to,
if you want to, if you're aware, and if you want to. I
correct.
think that's very interesting that you practiced it with a timer and now it comes naturally.
Yeah, it's a easy thing to the point where my daughter has an Apple Watch and during the day at school, I will text her I love you or whatever, depending on the day she's having. If she has a test, I will text her a message just as a constant reminder, because I don't want them to grow up and also be unaffectionate towards others or not know how to receive affection when it is given to them.
So practice the skill. And also it teaches your child how to know how to receive that affection.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is it necessary, in your opinion, to confront someone who has been a part of your experience, maybe being negative experience as a child, now that you're an adult? For example, you mentioned that there's certain things that your mom did not teach you. Did you feel that part of your healing journey included confronting her, or is that not necessary?
I think it depends on the person. So for me, it's not because it's my life and I have to make the choice to change. confronting her does nothing for me. She can't go back and change that experience for me because she did what she knew to do. It's I think it's important if it's something that where someone, for example, if someone was physically abused and they need to be healed from that, I do think it's important that that situation is confronted in some way just to get that out. So I think it depends on the person and it depends on the situation. For me, there was no need. I needed to change because confronting her would not change the experience for me. My goal was to forgive, let it go, move on, and live my life in a way that it's improved and better for those that have to experience me.
Okay. And have you seen a correlation between self-love and self-confidence being affected by negative childhood experiences?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you at a young age cannot qualify or quantify, if no one's qualifying or quantifying for you that you are loved, then how do you know you are? How do you determine that you are enough or you're good enough the way you're showing up to the world? So there's definitely a correlation. The goal then is once you notice that there's something lacking based on self love and self awareness, you then should take the steps to figure out how to gain that self love and self awareness and not depend on other people to do that for you.
Well, you've given us your personal experience on the matter. So I guess my question is, are there any positive experiences that maybe have an effect in adulthood that
Um,
maybe you see you have, but other people don't have?
yes, I would hope so that everyone can think of a time in their childhood where they had positive experiences. And I think like simple things like in talking to people, interviewing people, and meeting with people, people really remember the simple things. So, like just going to the movies with your family, time you're just sitting down and laughing, telling jokes. So, I think there are instances of positivity where you you can find moments where you're like, man, my childhood was fun for this reason. You know, my fondest moments were anytime I was with my grandparents was the best moment, you know. And when anytime I remember those positive drops in love and affection from my grandparents, it makes up for anything else that may be negative. So I think while you're dealing with your childhood trauma, thinking about who did what to you, what you were missing, it's also important to recognize that there are moments in time where you had positivity in your life. Because if not, then something was really missing. But I think everyone has instances where you got gifts, you got hugged, you got love, you had moments with people in your family where you felt like you were part of something.
I think we generally tend to pull on the negative. So, have you found people are having conflicting emotions? The same person who made my childhood difficult is also the same person who gave me love and attention. How does someone deal with such a situation? How do you, as an adult, reconcile the two so that you're having a peaceful moment about it?
I think we have to we have to recognize what people have to give. So for the most part, parents will give you shelter, they'll give you food, they'll give you clothes, they'll give you the basic things that you need. That is excellent because there are children who don't have that. So recognizing that there are these things that I did not have, but you had shelter, you had food, you weren't hungry, or there are things that your parents did give you that you can say, okay, for every negative, there's a positive because this part of my life I did not have to worry about.
Okay. What kind of negative emotions? can be studied, or have you seen in people you've dealt with? They have carried from their childhood, like guilt, like fear. Are there other emotions that people should look out for?
I think the biggest thing really is how to communicate in relationships. I know that's not an emotion, but I think that's the biggest thing, how to communicate in different relationships. So, with your friends, with your spouse, with your children, with your coworkers, with your bosses. I think that is the biggest thing. And once you can learn how to communicate effectively, it channels that. And then with um, I think another negative emotion that people carry is fear and anxiety. And the question to ask when fear shows up based on whatever happened in your childhood is, what am I afraid of? And once you can answer, what am I afraid of? The next question is, what is the worst that can happen? And as you ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? The worst thing that could happen may be death. Is this situation actually going to kill me? And if the answer is no, then how do I work through this to ensure that I remove the fear that keeps showing up?
Okay. And what made you start your podcast? And how can we find your work?
What made me start? It was just simple this. I felt that parents needed a platform where they can recognize, well, they can come in and talk about their trauma and recognize how it's affecting them as adults and parents. And then I bring on experts who can then help provide tools, information, and knowledge to help parents be better parents and better adults so that the world can experience them better and then their children can experience them better. So the goal for the podcast is really to bring people together to learn and grow and improve how we all parent.
Okay. What's your website? Or how do we get your podcast?
Website is adarajoy.com, and all of that information is posted on the website.
Okay, so I'm going to share that in the, for those of you who are watching on YouTube or other media, I'm going to be sharing that in the description.
Okay.
So my final question is, if we forget everything that you have shared with us today, what would be the one take home that you would like us to have?
Um, Remember that in this moment, this is all that matters. So, whatever interaction you're having with your children in this moment is all that matters. So, with if you're correcting a child right now, what can you do to make sure that at the end of the correction, there's a positivity added to it?
Well, I think that that's a wonderful point. This is the only moment that we have, and we should definitely be in the present. I also want to call out a point that you made. You said parents give what they have.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a resource that I like to call on to, where Bishop T.D. Jakes was saying, you cannot ask someone to give you a resource they don't have, because they will give you everything they have and you will keep expecting more, but it's the
Yeah.
end. So I think that we also need to learn from what our parents had. They
Correct.
possibly gave everything that they could.
Correct.
Um, Thank you so much, Nkechi. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to share with us.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
So, thank you so much for being my first guest in 2023. And I hope that you continue working with the people that you're working with. We shall be sharing all your information in the description. And please make sure that you check out Nkechi's podcast, and also visit my Facebook page. Very soon, we'll be launching my program, which will be including mindset and clarity. And I hope to see you there. So, thank you and have an amazing rest of the day or evening. Bye.